Hello again, welcome to Psi-Friday with Mason. I'm here, Mason Winfield, at the lovely Roycroft Inn, and our subject this Friday is one we will return to many a time. It is the imaginary friend. Psychology has long been familiar, and I mean mainstream psychology, long familiar with the phenomenon of the imaginary friend. And I mean that to mean the imaginary friend of children. You know, world societies have always thought that children are closer to the other world. They are either closer to heaven because they're younger, they are closer to the fairies, they're in some kind of a realm, or they're closer to it than they will ever be again until they become spirits themselves. So it's not unusual to think that children have extrasensory abilities. And I've noticed that this phenomenon of the imaginary friend, first of all, it's not that rare. There have been some very famous, successful people who have had imaginary friends as children. The Irish poet William Butler Yeats, the British statesman Sir Winston Churchill. I mean, these guys didn't end up doing too bad. So it's not considered alarming to have an imaginary friend as a child. Where it crosses my desk is when the child starts getting information, allegedly from this friend, that the kid couldn't have. They learn things, they know things about the future, things about the present, things about the past. They're getting information from this friend. And you have no idea how many cases I've run into on my tours, at my talks, where a family would show up and they'd point at a kid and say, you know, he had an imaginary friend as a child. And inevitably, the kid won't be, I've never investigated an active case. Inevitably, the kid will be 8, he'll be 12. I go, you remember that? The kid will go, they don't remember a thing. But that's not unusual, because the phenomenon of the imaginary friend gets us into recovered memory syndrome, it gets us into extrasensory perception, it gets us into psychic phenomena, and sometimes it gets us into the fairy world. Because when you interview the child, if you're lucky enough to get a live case where you can interview the kid who's got the friend that no one can see, you ask him all kinds of questions about the friend. And the friend isn't always another child. Sometimes the friend is an adult. Sometimes it is animal-like. It's like a gnome or something. But it's never bigger than the kid. If the kid's that big, he or she is talking to a fairy. That's what you got. And it just has so many interesting parameters. What I will tell you is that today's mainstream psychology tends to like to materialize, to diminish, they like to eliminate any possibility of anything supernatural / paranormal going on. And today's psychologists are very often including a phenomenon of the personified toy. Like a lot of kids have like a stuffed toy, and or maybe several of them, and they've got this little paracosm, this little environment of the toys interacting. I had that when I was a little kid. When I was 4, I remember it. I had a bunch of little stuffed toys, and they all had their roles. I was never under any illusion that they were alive or ever said anything to me. They were toys, and I knew it. But I need to tell you that this phenomenon of the imaginary friend, the invisible playmate, is profound, it's interesting, it's fascinating. I don't think a great study, or at least I'm not aware of a great study that's ever been done on it, but it overlaps into some really interesting paranormal areas, including ghosts, spirits, prophecy, extrasensory perception, even fairy lore. And you know, my friends, I am fascinated in not only this subject, but whatever supernatural, psychic, paranormal experiences you might have had, if you have particularly some kind of a story about the imaginary friend, I would love to hear from you. Please comment in the comments below. Thanks again for joining us on Psi-Friday with Mason. Look forward to seeing you next Friday.